of this. Can everyone hear me and see the screen here that says it's a slide with some photos on it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let me just introduce a little bit about this. So for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to go through some things. I know some of you might know a lot about IBA. Some of you might have heard about it and kind of be intrigued, but not know that much about it. So the idea of the info session is we're going to get you up to speed with what to expect, and then you can make a more informed decision about whether or not you want to sign up for this course. So, so these pictures on the front are some of our teams. In fact, we just heard from Ben Miller, who's the guy on the left photo. This person here, that's Ben Miller. And we just heard from Jake Miller, his brother. He's on the 2007 or 2019 team. So, but the team, the photo on the left was the group from last year. And some of the people are still around. Maddie Bishop, May Lou, Ben. So these are all people, if some of you may know, you could just talk to them in person. This group, there's still actually some of them around. Spencer Fust, Iden, Jake, Patrick is gone now, and Andrew Stearns is still here. So there are people around. You could, if you know them, you could kind of talk to them in person about IBA. But moving on, though, the first thing I want to introduce you to is the IBA website, which has a bunch of stuff on it. So if you go to this link here, iba.aapg.org, you can read all about all these categories shown here. I'm not going to go through all this, but if you're interested, I would highly recommend it. So they're gearing up for next year. Who will win IBA 2021? This is big question mark, but every year there's over 300 teams participating in this worldwide. This is just kind of one of their introductory pages about the program, and you can read about it here. But it's basically a competition. So here's a team of 5 persons presenting to this panel of judges. These are people from the oil industry, usually in Houston. Sometimes they bring in people from outside Houston. And you can see it's a very much an individual / team effort, where here this person is presenting. They're looking over here probably to the slides. It is a competition, so it differs a little bit, or differs a lot from SEG Evolve, which some of you may have also heard about that program. That's not a competition. That's more of kind of the same idea, where people are presenting, but not in a ranked way as they do with IBA. But I think a couple of people are around the department now who've been in Evolve, and you could probably seek them out and find out more about that program, but it's a different program than IBA. Okay, so so the registration is open, and that means that's why we're trying to get organized now. By December 18th, we need to send them a list of people, and it can be sort of preliminary, because often we don't know at that time who's going to be on the team. But in any case, we do need to register by December 18th. That's why we're sort of trying to get organized now. So the program's been around 15 years, 82 countries, 540 universities, and it's involved 6,000 students. Okay, so just a real quick history of my involvement with this program. I came to UH in 2011, and the program was a little bit shaky. That it wasn't a class at that time, and myself and John Castagna in 2012 were able to elevate it to a class, and that made a huge difference. Because think about it, who wants to be volunteering in this sort of club-like activity and not get course credit for it? So for that reason, it had kind of faltered, where there wasn't a lot of interest. Our first year, 2012, we could only find 4 people to take it. It had kind of fallen into disrepair. But by making it a class, we steadily improved the program over the past 9 years. And by the way, this team of 4 persons, which was unheard of, and I've never seen another team in 4 persons in all the years I've done this, came in 3rd. So that we actually got on the radar screen the first year out. Okay, and then we fast forward to 2017. This was our first World Championship team. And I just want to point out, I think Ben had just mentioned, or Jake had mentioned, the value of this for getting job. Just go through the members here. Eric Lund works for Shell. Lizer Silva did have a job. He recently was laid off, but he's still in the industry. Walter Reed works for Exxon, and Andrew Steyer works for Total. So all of these guys from 2017 are presently working. And then 2019, our second world championship team, and we just heard from Jake. Patrick is not, he's not in the industry at the moment. I think he had an internship with BP. Spencer has an internship with EOG, and Andrew had an internship with Shell. I'm not sure if that's permanent or not, but they're all out there, competing for these jobs. So that's great. Okay, so in a quick overview of the history. So like I said, I started in this 2012, and we strung a bunch of third place finishes. We were sort of getting our feet on the ground as far as understanding the program and how to do well in it. And by 2016, we had a breakthrough. We came in second after all these third place finishes. And then after that, things started to gel. 2017, we had a championship team. And this wasn't all my doing. This was John Castagna, a guy named Kurt Rudolph, who was one of our advisors, or actually he's an adjunct, and many other industry people. So it was a kind of a group supervision effort. But in any case, we figured it out, what is a really good presentation. So that's been a big help. And then 2019, we finished, well, this was actually the second world place finish, or first place finish. In 2020, we came in second in the Gulf Coast. So we were beaten by University of Louisiana Lafayette, which actually went on and won the global competition. So we were in there, I think we were close, but didn't get to the finals. Okay, so here are the topics I want to talk about. Competition versus non-competition teams. So as you can see, there's only 5 persons on the competition team, and we have to select those, we being the faculty advisors. The way we do that is in January, well, first of all, we determine who's interested, and that's part of this, why we're having this meeting. But by early January, when classes start, we'll have kind of little talks by the different people interested in being on the competition team. And we try to evaluate, how's your speaking skills, what's your background, etc. And normally sometimes we have a lot of people interested in this course. One year we had 17 people in the course. Other years we barely have 5 persons, so it varies a lot. But if there is a spillover, if there are more people than the 5, then we have what we call the non-competition team. You would have exactly the same data. You would be given exactly the same workload, but you're not competing in this sort of global effort. And people say, well, I don't really want to be on the non-competition team. I don't really want to do all that work and not be on the competition. But here's the thing. If you go into an interview, they're going to ask you, were you part of IBA? And if you were on any team, competition or non-competition team, you say yes. They don't care, right? All they want to know is that you had this experience. So I tell people, if you're after IBA as a way to enhance your chances of getting in the oil industry, I would say be on the non-competition team. One other issue with that, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is this eligibility. So if you've had more than 1 year of industry experience, then you are not eligible to be on the competition team. The idea being they don't want people who are sort of ringers getting on the team, with maybe 5 years of industry experience or something like that. Okay, course prereqs. So it's a steep learning curve. I know some of you have been in our basins class, which is a great preparation, but if you haven't, cautionary note is, you do need basic seismic interpretation, you do need basic structure, stratigraphy, etc. If you're somebody who doesn't have any of those things, this is maybe not a great idea, just because you're going to get thrown into the deep end really fast. Okay, eligibility, I mentioned the 12-month thing. I mentioned how we select people for this. And this leads us to specialty jobs. So there's 5 persons on a team. Here are the specialties. We usually have 2 seismic interpreters who kind of work together on the interpreting the seismic grid. We have 1 geophysicist who works on our well tie and maybe attributes, depending on, 3D or not. We have a person who does the basin modeling, generally working with Petromod. And then the 5th person is kind of a structure slash tectonic slash paleogeography person. And you can basically, each of these persons is contributing to that specialty, and it's all going to come together in the form of a 25-slide PowerPoint presentation, or 25-minute PowerPoint presentation. So roughly maybe 5 slides per person. Okay, weekly class meeting. We meet Thursday from 7 to 10, 3 hours straight. Basically, the meetings are you guys, once you get going, you come in and you present your 25-minute presentation. At first, it's a little rough, but as the weeks go by, you improve it every week. So what we want to see is constant improvement, not a plateauing of everything, because then you're going to run out of time. And that would apply both for the competition team and also the non-competition team. Okay, the schedule for project data delivery and competition. So usually the data delivery is around February 1st. That date can vary a bit. That's when we get the digital data set from AAPG for whatever area. Keeping in mind, I think there's about 25 data sets, and we've had, just since I've been here, we've had 9 of them. And they are adding some new ones, so it's changing. But basically, you don't know what data you're going to get until you actually get it. And then it's off to the races where you need to get going. You have about 8 weeks to work up the 25-minute presentation. And the competition, therefore, is usually at the end of March. It used to be at Anadarko, I'm not sure. Well, and then last year, we went remote because of the virus, so we didn't go anywhere for that. And it's likely this year will also be with the virus, so we'll be remote there too. So running the course on Teams, I know that sounds not great, but it actually worked pretty well. We got about halfway through it last spring and got shut down because of the virus, but we switched over to Teams and it worked fine. And we even had the competition on Zoom or on Teams. So the time commitment. So this is where I'm going to ask some of these previous IBA students like Ben and Jake to kind of chime in here and talk a little bit about this, because I know people are concerned, like, for example, maybe you're a last semester master's student working on your thesis. That may not be a great idea to do IBA. But I'll let these guys talk to you about that. And then juggling with other courses. We've had some issues with other supervisors getting upset with us because they felt like we didn't keep them informed of their student signing up for this. So what I would recommend is you talk to your supervisor and say, hey, I'm going to sign up for IBA, and work it out before it gets to coming back to us, right? I don't want to get involved in that. I would prefer to see you work that out beforehand rather than just jumping in the course, and the next thing I know, I'm getting these sort of angry messages from the supervisor. And then course credit and grading. It's a 3-credit course. So you get 3 credits. It's a lot of work for 3 credits, but it has other benefits too. And the grading, normally we give A's for the competition team. They generally do pretty well. And then for non-competition, though, we do evaluate you guys just internally. In other words, we have you make your 25-minute presentation, and we determine the grade based on that. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over now to maybe some of our, well, first of all, are there any questions about any of this before we get started? Because what I'm going to do now is turn it over to some of the previous students like Ben and Jake, and maybe let them answer some of your questions. But first, are there any questions for me as sort of the faculty organizer?
Dr. Mann, this is Nicola.
Okay, yeah.
I do have one question about the eligibility, if I may ask now, or I have to wait until the end.
Well, no, go ahead.
Yeah.
How many months have you been involved in the oil industry? And by involved, this could include internships. It could include full-time jobs. It could include maybe a job you had and were laid off from, but you need to tally up all of those months. And if they're
12,
more than,
12 months.
okay, so you're at 12.0 months. I think you're okay.
12.0. Yeah, and then
Okay.
at that 12.0, meaning 6 months of actual work, and then there was, when the COVID happened, pretty much it was on and off. So because I was working from home, so there will be 2 weeks no work, and then 1 week work.
But were you being paid continuously during that period?
So when I was sent home because of the COVID, I was only paid for the amount of work I actually did. So I was not being paid for those 6 months straight like I was before.
Okay, well, maybe tally that up and just send me an email, because we don't want to get disqualified over something like this. And what I do is, if there's any sort of gray area, like sometimes people say, well, I drove a truck, or there's things that are very peripheral to the industry. That's usually not a problem. But there are some gray areas, like, say, people who examine core for 2 years or something. That could be a problem, right? Because it's more directly applicable. But write me an email and just tally up what you consider the months that you've worked for the industry. So any other questions about that, or any of these things on the list?
Would we still be able to participate in a non-competing team?
Who is this? Is this?
This is Geraldine.
Geraldine. So how many months do you have now with the industry?
Almost 2 years.
Okay, yeah. No, now you would be a good person. Like, if you just want to get this experience, to have, this kind of training, I would say you would be an ideal person for the non-competition team, because there's no way that you would be eligible with 2 years industry to be on competition. But like I said, when you go to interview, they don't ask you, were you on the competition, non-competition? They just ask you, were you in IBA, period. So.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so Ben and Jake, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, do you guys want to just chime in with, I don't know if people listening have any specific questions, or if you guys just want to kind of add a few things that you think are important for them to know.
Yeah, I can address the workload. So a lot of people usually have concerns when it comes to IBA and the workload, and we were discussing that at the beginning of this, if some of y'all missed it. But most of that comes down to communicating with your team and letting them know, kind of, coming together as a team, what we need to get done, and what you have to do, and what days you kind of need to get those things done. Like, okay, I have a test coming up, so I need the Tuesday and Wednesday before this to make sure, I have time to get this, to get my studying done. And just really kind of, it comes down to communication and teamwork to kind of pick up where people need help and don't need help. And this also includes, with IBA, we usually work over spring break, and that's due to the timing of the final presentations, everything like that. And spring break is usually right at the point of which you need to finalize all your presentations and get everything down tight. And honestly, spring break gives you a really good opportunity to kind of focus and complete everything that needs to get done there. Does anybody have any questions about how we kind of manage the workload of the classes, or anything on that?
I do, kind of. Back to the rule of thumb has been like 40 hours per week. So is that per person, or is this a total? That seems low if it's total. So
ideally, it would be per person. Each person you would want to be, working and progressing. You don't really want to have downtime for somebody. Sometimes some weeks are a bit lighter just because you're kind of bottlenecked with somebody else's work that are trying to get this done, so you can start working on this. But it doesn't mean typically you just stop. You can go help them, or you can take that opportunity to go, okay, well, I have a moment here, I can look at my homework schedule and see if you can get ahead on that. So there's always some way, some side of a balancing act of where you can be progressing. You shouldn't, you shouldn't just be hanging out sometimes.
Okay.
And that way, by doing that, it allows you to keep ahead of the curve instead of trying to catch back up and then getting into a scramble and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, go on.
So the workload is mostly up front, I would say, because it's really important to get that mapping done early on. And once you have a lot of your framework developed, it starts to lessen and at the end of it. But the workload also changes. So at the front of it, it's, doing the interpretation, setting up the basin model, and then it starts transitioning into slide work and getting the presentation set up. And then towards the end, it's more of just rehearsing your presentation. So the workload the type of work you're doing varies, and the amount, I would say, lessens as you go. It's very rushed at the start because you have to get everything in place to start developing your story and to start doing research. Because during the competition, they'll ask you questions about the area that you need to have a depth of knowledge or a background in to be able to answer it. So it's really important to get the framework set up early on. So yeah, I would say it's more than 40 hours at the start, but it lessens towards the end. And that is individually, but it also, it depends on your data set as well. And each data set has its own specific limitation. So some data sets are easier to work with than others. And so that kind of plays into when you'll have that larger workload, I guess you could say, because if you have 3D, your geophysicist may be very busy in particular because they may be doing AVO analysis. But if you have bad 2D data, then you may be doing a lot more work on the developing the story rather than the interpretation, because it's you can only do so much. So it's kind of depends on what you get as well.
Let me just add a few things about the teamwork and how why industry likes people or like students that have had IBA. It's a very intensive sort of team exercise, more so probably than you've ever had at UH or anywhere. And by that, I mean, in order to break down this workload, everybody has to sort of carry their share. And not only that, you have to communicate. So some people think, well, I'll just go off by myself during the week and do my own little bit, and then I'll come back at the class on Thursday and talk about, no, you need to do your bit, and you need to go back to your teammates and coordinate how your bit fits in with their bit. In other words, it's not a individual exercise. It's really requires you to always have this team effort going. And we've had, sometimes people don't get along, and sometimes they don't like being told to do things. And you're trying to get to be a team player, somebody who's a very skilled team worker. And why is that important? Is that's what the whole oil industry is based on, teamwork, right? So you want to get beyond just being the individual person who's doing their little assignment for the week. You want to be that team player who's not only doing your work, but you're integrating that with these other people.
So sorry, go
ahead. Go ahead. No,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna build on that. So during my internship at BP, the group I was working with in GOM, they had this Scrum method where it is very team oriented, very similar to how IBA is, because you pass work back and forth. And so how at least BP does it is they have their own board of tasks that they have to complete to meet their whatever goal it is. And if somebody's falling behind or takes vacation or needs help with something, they'll drop whatever they're doing and pick up their task. And it's very much like IBA. And currently they're going through restructuring, and it sounds like they're pushing all their teams to that type of formatting. And it sounds like other bigger oil and gas companies are changing to this format as well. So that's a good thing to be able to talk about. Additionally, the teamwork side is very important because you need to know everybody's part. Because there's this kind of awkward thing where judges may ask particular people in the questioning about a certain part of the presentation that they necessarily weren't in charge of the full development of. So they may ask somebody that didn't do Bayesian modeling about Bayesian modeling, and they should be able to answer that question. But also because of that, you get a huge range of knowledge from this course. Initially, when I went into it, I really only knew a lot about, you know, introductory stuff to geophysics and seismic interpretation, but through it, I was able to learn a lot more about geochemistry and Bayesian modeling and risking and all that. So it gives you a full view of prospect development that gives you the ability to talk to in interviews, because you have your hand in these different areas of prospect development. So I thought it was extremely useful for my interviews because I was able to talk to pretty much all their questions because I had some type of background in it through this process.
And that's an important point too, is what we call depth of knowledge. Like, I mean, you could memorize a 25-minute PowerPoint presentation, but if you don't fully understand everything that went into that presentation, these judges are expert at picking you apart. In other words, if you mention that you did attribute analysis and then they ask you, well, can you explain attribute analysis, and you go blank, that you're not going to do well. So the judging is really about looking at a presentation, figuring out, do these people presenting really understand what's going on? And particularly when you get to that world level of competition, I mean, they're really looking for little things, little weaknesses, and that's where the scoring will come down to. All these teams have good presentations. That's almost a given. But what separates them is their depth of knowledge. Some team members or teams in general just don't, they don't really understand that well what they were doing, and the judges, their job is to figure that one out. So
yeah, so you'll learn a lot in a very short period of time. So you'll get a huge jump start in your knowledge. That was probably the most I learned ever in college was during that semester. So you get basically as much as you put in, which is really good. So.
And one other thing, like, I think has benefited Jake and Ben and everybody, they learn how to present, and for example, Jake, went to BP, he had an internship. Well, at the end, you have your presentation. It's a, individual presentation. And, if you've been through IBA, you have that experience in the back of your mind, and that gives you confidence that you can pull that off in front of a whole room full of industry experts. If you don't have IBA, I think it would be a much more nerve-wracking experience, not feeling 100% confident that you could pull something like that off. So it gives you that experience to get into those situations where you've got these big presentations and you have to do well, and you can still pull it off. So do you agree with that, Jake? I mean, is that?
Yeah, very much. I'm going to build on that. So the presentation at the end of my internship may be different for different companies. It was 45 minutes actually. And the IBA one is 25. So, there's a lot of different topics you have to be knowledgeable in and cover and be able to present very clearly. And because of IBA, I was able to do a very good job of that. I had some people stay behind after my presentation and ask if U of H runs some type of how to present course, and because they really liked the way I was able to present a bunch of complex ideas very clearly and concisely, not to draw it out. So through IBA, I was able to develop my presenting skills, and it carried through to that presentation, I believe.
Yeah, IBA is pretty much that. This is pretty much that course for that.
Yeah, exactly. So my internship project really did line up very close to my IBA experience. And there are some other colleges that are not known for their technical skills in this program, but present really well, so they do really well. I won't mention names, but yeah, so presentation is also kind of a big thing.
Well, okay, so as I don't want to go on too long with this, but I'm just looking at the names of people here, and I see some people I don't know. I see a lot of that I do know, but Daniela Easley, do you want to just say a few words about yourself? I just want to go through and make sure I know who everyone is here.
Hi, so I was actually curious to get some more information about maybe not doing IBA this next spring, but the one after that. So I have kind of a crazy semester next semester, but I would be looking to bring maybe like the geochemistry specialist position to the team, but probably in the future.
But Daniela, here's an issue. You know, generally people try to do IBA early on. And part of that is, as a graduate student, things tend to get crazier later on. And I know that, you know, if you take a lot of courses and things, you can also have a very busy schedule early on. But one thing I've noticed is people that have said that, well, I plan to take IBA later, often get caught up in like thesis or other
Right.
things that sometimes prevent them from taking it later on. So that's just something to keep in mind. Any previous students have thoughts on that, or maybe what you would advise her to do with this?
So to get your biggest bang for the buck, I guess I would say, is to take it early on, just because it directly impacts your internship and job potential, just because it's additional experience and it'll help you interview, just because you have that additional experience to talk to. So if you take it later, you may be graduating and taking an internship or whatever, because normally you want to do your internships early on in your graduate career so you can try and graduate into a position, into a role. But you know, you kind of have to do what you have to do. So it's, you know,
Yeah,
there may be leeway in your scheduling. I don't know.
I'm trying to balance it because next semester specifically, I have, I'm head TA again, and then I have one class left for my machine learning certificate, and then I'm proposing. So with those three things, I just don't know that I would be able to commit the time that my other team members deserve quite yet. But I am trying to, you know, I'm definitely trying to be mindful of the fact that it helps with internships, and I need to start looking into those more.
Yeah, so one thing I would suggest, if you, for some reason you don't end up taking IBA next semester, if you decide it's too much, maybe possibly look in taking the Evolve course. It's not a competition. However, I feel like you would cover some of the same topics. I haven't taken it, but from what I hear, it's similar development and style, just not as intense because they don't really have a.
You're not competing.
Well, it's not competing, but their time frame is stretched out a lot.
It's for the whole semester, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so and maybe this isn't true, but I had kind of heard that there's not really any kind of geochemical emphasis in the Evolve project, but I don't know if that's the case.
That may be true. I'm not sure. However, from what I've seen, especially if you're looking into going into exploration and industry, they're looking for well-rounded geoscientists.
Right.
So it's good to have experience in all sectors, or at least be able to talk to it in some form or fashion. So you'd be able to get that experience by doing that. And that's why I'm saying IBA was really good for me, because it helped me learn about areas that I did not have previous knowledge in. So when they ask a question, I'm at least able to understand what they're asking and address it. And it helps you, because in order to be a good geologist, you need to be a good geophysicist, I believe, and vice versa. Because if you're a geologist, you understand the framework and structures you're seeing, but if you can't understand the waveforms that you're interpreting on the seismic, you could be seeing something wrong. I mean, I think Brian's in this channel. I give him a quick little crash course on you know, what the impedance patterns of seismic means and how to identify DHIs and things like that. So that's just, you know, you need both to be able to fully understand what's happening.
Okay, well, let's move on to Rachel R. Rachel R., do you have any, I just kind of get a view of, you know, who's on this call and what kind of where you're at with IBA.
I'm so sorry. I just got my tonsils removed, so it's really hard for me to speak.
Okay.
I'm interested definitely in taking this course. The only issue that I would have is like Daniela said, time constraints, because next semester I will be my first semester as a TA, and I'm not sure exactly, if I would be able to commit like, I don't think it would be fair to my team members if I got bundled down with that and wasn't able to commit as much time as would be necessary to the projects.
Well, I mean, we've had other people having TA. Usually a TA, it shouldn't be more than 20 hours a week. I know sometimes it can be more than 20 hours a week, but yeah, that's something that,
So this,
well, anybody want to comment who's been a TA and done IBA? I don't know, is there anyone in that category?
I don't think May was or Ben was, but I know Iden and Spencer are both TAing at the time during our IBA, and I was also working full time during the first 2 weeks of our IBA session. So that was a lot, just because I was working full time and doing IBA and doing school. But that's kind of why you have a team, right? And you want to do the work up front when you're not busy in the semester. So you're able to pass the work back and forth between your team members. You have 5 of you to try and accommodate each other's schedules. So like Ben was saying, okay, I need these 2 days to study for an exam. Well, then you have to pass it to somebody else and they'll pick it up and they'll do the same later on. So you just kind of have to work close together and figure out when things are going to get done. What is it, like 9 weeks, 10 weeks?
8 weeks.
8 weeks before you get it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just, have an end goal, but you can break it down in smaller sections and to what you want to get done weekly to get to that end goal. But it's a lot of work, but as a team, you're able to do it. I don't know, Ben, you may be able to talk to it from your experience as well.
You spoke well.
Okay.
So Rachel, maybe, I don't know if you know Spencer or Andrew.
Yeah, I have one thing to say. So to help us to better manage our time, and I remember when I was doing the IB in the spring, I had to do my PhD proposal the same time while I'm working on the team. So it definitely helped me with my time management skill. So I think that's another important thing that you could learn from this IBA.
Yeah, I mean, as a supervisor of students like May and Ben and others, what I've noticed is people that have taken IBA come out at a much higher energy level, because they've had to manage their time, they've put all these hours in, and it carries over into their thesis work where suddenly, they're at a whole higher level of productivity. And so that's, and that's helping you ramp up to industry. I mean, industry now is stripped down, they have all these layoffs. You've got to be at that high energy level, I think, to make it in industry. So there is that aspect too, that it is a challenge, juggling courses, thesis proposal, whatever. But that's kind of just the reality, I think, of working these days, is you've got to be at that high energy level. So, okay, so, and then we have Yin Kai Wang. Would you like to say a few things about yourself, please?
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm in Taiwan. I'm the second year's geophysical student. I have one quick question about the eligibility for non-competition teams. So I just want to make it right. Is there any the requirement for non-competition teams? For example, like the work experience, or everybody is eligible for non-competition teams?
Wait, I'm not sure I know what you're asking. So you're asking about the competition or the non-competition team?
A non-competition team.
Non-competition team. Yeah, for that, if you have more than 1 year industry experience, it doesn't matter, right? Because the eligibility 12-month thing only applies if you want to be on the competition team. Okay. So how much industry experience do you have?
Actually, I have 3 work experience, but in Taiwan, not in the US.
Well, that doesn't matter though. It just can be any industry anywhere.
Okay.
So you have 3 years industry in Taiwan, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So you would be ineligible for the competition team, but you would be perfectly okay for the non-competition.
Okay, I got it. Thank
Okay.
you.
So I think, the only other person I see on here, maybe Brian Moore. Do you want to say a few things? Or
Yeah, I can.
yeah.
As you know, Dr. Mann, I've been working with CBTH for about 2 years now, and I'm a first semester master's student now. I have a post-bac, and I am studying in Barbados, Trinidad region, Barbados Accretionary Prism. I'm very interested in the competition team, and I kind of have a view of the competition team that a lot of people have not seen, and I've seen them working in the lab, and I've seen how they communicate and seen how they operate. And I've also seen how they function at much higher levels after the fact. And that's kind of what I'm most interested in obtaining is the not only the knowledge, but also the work ethic after the fact.
Okay, good. Okay, so I think we've heard from everyone on the call, but are there any other questions for myself or any of the previous students? And you know, there are other people who are not on the call, like Spencer, for example. Spencer, if someone's interested in Evolve, Spencer has had both IBA and Evolve. So he would be a good person to ask, you know, what are the differences? Do they cover geochem and Evolve? That I don't know. Another good person, I think Andrew also was part of that same Evolve team. So he's somebody who's done both IBA and Evolve. Okay, well, I think we'll leave it at that. So we have your names, and we'll kind of put up a little email listserv and keep you informed. But like I said, this is a course, so you would have to enroll by the enrollment period for next semester. Usually we have we'll start meeting the first week of class. And like I said, we'll go through this sort of presentation thing where we're trying to determine who's going to be on the competition team and what role would that person be based on your background. So we hope to hear from you, some of you in the course. And then by February 1st, we'd have the data, and then you're going for the next 8 weeks. There is some silver lining here. The course is basically over in 8 weeks. So by the end of March, you're done. The only exception might be for the competition team. If they get into the finals, which means winning the Gulf Coast section, then they would keep going until usually the ACE meeting, which is usually held sometime in the summer. So it does drag it out a bit for the competition team, but that doesn't affect the non-competition team. You're done by the end of March. So it's an intensive 8 weeks, but the good news is that you're pretty much done with the course by the end of March. There's no final exam or anything like that. There's only the presentation. Okay, so I'll leave you all at that, but I appreciate you guys listening in. And we did record this, so if you know of other people, let us know, and we could send them the link to this meeting, and they could listen in what was talked about here today. Okay, well, have a good week, and we'll hope to see you back next semester, if not before, in the IBA course.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.